Cut them off. No delay, snapped Cavern Stoke, his command slicing the tribunal air sharper than the glinting sigils overhead. Around him the council chamber responded in perfect mechanical choreography, rows of aides shifting to their terminals, relay towers humming into override, status glyphs spiraling across heads-up displays. A single confirmation tone, sharp and immediate, echoed through the domed hall like a struck blade. The order was absolute. Earth's voice would die. Through the enormous convex viewport overlooking Concord's central relay nexus, the planet itself hung like a muted ember, gray continents smothered by the swirling lattice of orbital comm satellites. Each tower, each junction node, flared once invisible shutdown, cascading into a synchronized blackout. It looked from a distance like a net collapsing on a cornered prey. Timestamp purge achieved, an aide murmured. Earth's channels are null. Cavern allowed himself a rare smile, a thin, brittle thing that barely touched his eyes. Then humanity, he said, folding his hands behind his back, is history. In the silence that followed, the counselors exchanged quick glances, some triumphant, others uneasy. Outside, the web of relay towers around Earth pulsed once more, then stilled, a darkened crown around a mute world. Across the Nexus command bridge, a subtle shift filled the air, not sound, not light, but a pressure, like breath held too long. Stoke frowned, sensing it. Proceed to record archival, he ordered, masking the discomfort crawling up his spine. Technicians moved fast, hands darting across luminous keys, yet somewhere in the console banks, minute error warnings flickered, invisible to casual notice, lost beneath layers of normal telemetry. At the far edge of the chamber, Ralvik Owen squinted at a secondary panel. Something was wrong with the checksum logs, but protocol demanded silence until full review. He tamped the instinct down. Another second wouldn't matter. The silence deepened. Lights across the fleet display boards turned a shade dimmer, not black, but heavier, as if a weight had been pressed against every sensor, every feed line. Even the air itself seemed thinner, drier, as if it recoiled. Stoke exhaled slowly, misting the inside of his breath mask. Someone give me a feed confirmation. I want to see the last Earth message. The transmission manager, a gray-scaled Varic male, adjusted his relay uplinks, his ridged forehead furrowed. Sir, there is no residual. The cutoff was absolute. No final protest. No plea. Stoke's voice sliced the space between them, harsher now. None, the Varic confirmed, his hands faltering slightly. It was as if they chose silence. The tribunal floor buzzed with restrained conversation. Some voiced victory. The suppression had been total. Others whispered of overreach, of treaties bent too far. No one spoke of risk. They didn't dare. From his corner, Ralvik Owen allowed his gaze to drift to the heads-up error log. 5 checksum failures. 6, 8, small anomalies. Tiny drifts where packet returns should have been clean. Static bled into his earpiece, almost imperceptible. A feeling crawled beneath his skin. Not alarm, not yet, but something colder, heavier. Earth wasn't fighting. Earth wasn't reacting. Earth was waiting. The heads-up displays above the main tribunal floor flickered again. For a heartbeat, only for those watching carefully, Earth's timestamp glitched. Not a disconnection, but a distortion, as if something else was answering in its place. Stoke didn't see it. His eyes were fixed on the display's main feed, a tactical map of Earth's orbital sector, now displaying only dead nodes. Relay towers dimmed, like candle stubs smothered under glass. Seal Earth's entry in the Council registry, he said, his voice a slow final hammer. Document their fall. Let the sectors know. Ralvik's fingers hovered over the alert panel. His training screamed to report the checksum failures, but under the rigid hierarchy of tribunal decorum, such minor faults were logged for post-op. Interruptions during victory declarations were career-ending. Instead, he stood silent. He would remember that silence for the rest of his life. On the far side of the command nexus, technicians initiated the registry seal. Earth's final bureaucratic execution. Glowing sector maps folded into themselves. Earth's identification glyph fading to stat. Outside the station's viewport, the physical markers of Earth's network, the sleek communication buoys and orbital bridges, flickered once. Ralvik watched, breath shallow. One buoy twitched, its alignment thrusters sparking in odd, irregular bursts. No pattern, no synchrony, almost like breathing. The tribunal clerks continued their documentation. Laser plasma displays flooded the chamber with updates, affirmations of total compliance, static locks confirmed at relay junctions from Kithar Verge to Jekan depths. They celebrated, yet the air itself felt different, thicker, slower, as if the station itself labored to draw breath. Ralvik's datapad chimed once, non-priority checksum deviation logged. He thumbed it close. In the far corner of the room, a junior adjudicator whispered under his breath, intended for no one. Why are the star fields dimmer? No one answered. Overhead, the rotating star map for the tribunal's outer holdings twitched. Tiny fractures rippling across the sectors, tied most closely to Earth's old comm systems. Lanes dimmed, navigation corridors narrowed. An engineer at the relay desk muttered, "Probably a calibration skip. Happens when we reroute." They needed it to be a calibration skip. They needed the silence to mean victory. Ralvik felt it, deep in the marrow of him. It wasn't victory. It was the breath before impact. Outside the tribunal walls, unseen and unspoken, Project Severance awakened. Across hidden nodes disguised as debris fields and abandoned archive vaults, Earth's passive shells, long inert, stirred to life. Data pulses, silent and ghosting beneath visible spectrum, surged along forgotten channels. 1,000 isolated systems, written off as ancient or irrelevant, listened for a single condition: no Earth timestamp in outgoing traffic. They found it, and they answered. Inside the tribunal, the last image recorded by official Concord archives showed a simple thing: Earth's orbital sector, quiet, unthreatening, forgotten, surrounded by a crown of darkened towers. But somewhere too deep to intercept, Earth's message pulsed outward: condition activation green. Ralvik's last unlogged thought, before the alarm sounded, wasn't one of duty or defiance. It was a line he had once read in an old Terran archive. Their philosophers writing of storms unseen, the silence before the water climbs the wall, and the walls, unseen, had already begun to crack. Broadcast the decree. No delays, Kevron Stoke ordered, voice cold as a blade laid flat against skin. Within seconds, the tribunal's main floor sprang into coordinated motion. Council aides fed commands into gleaming consoles, the overhead laser plasma displays strobing sharp updates across the vaulted ceiling. The banners of the Galactic Concord rippled along the walls, illuminated by gold and silver tracery. But for a heartbeat too long, one banner trembled at the wrong frequency before stabilizing. No one looked up. A calculated stillness enveloped the hall as dignitaries began to gather, draped in ceremonial cloaks, metallic threadwork catching the sterile lighting. The grand proclamation of Earth's subjugation had begun. A side chamber door swung open with a hiss, letting the sour scent of treated air seep into the tribunal's sanctum. Into the echoing space stepped Councillor Drevik Mar, his thin mouth twisting into a smirk not meant for public view. They expected mercy, he scoffed, letting the words curl into the high beams above. The quarry makes no bargains with the hunter. Muted chuckles answered him from the periphery. The display above shifted, casting a spiraling three-dimensional sector map of Earth's quadrant into the center of the floor. Where once vibrant relay traffic flowed, now only muted signal traces remained. A severed tree ringed by dead leaves. Stoke moved to the dais, hands clasped behind him, surveying the unfolding ceremony like an artist judging a half-finished canvas. "We grant Earth exactly what it wished," he announced, each syllable striking the room in crisp cadence. Silence. Across the distant relay corridors, minor packet deviations multiplied unnoticed. The screens brightened a fraction too much, colors oversaturating, as data beneath the visible layers churned in patterns no technician bothered to see. Ralvik Owen lingered near the edge of the platform, datapad cradled loosely in one hand. He tapped the edge once, hesitated, then tucked it behind his back. The checksum anomalies were still growing, like moss along cracked stone, but celebration demanded no interruption. One diplomat, draped in pale gray formal wear, raised a glass of nutrient mist toward the projection, toasting Earth's erasure from their records. His voice carried, sharp and haughty, across the rising susurrus of triumph. "To irrelevance, may their silence serve as our beacon." Heads-up displays flickered briefly at the room's edges, minor surges dismissed as atmospheric drift. Ralvik shifted his weight, the soles of his boots whispering against the quartz floor tiles. His stomach twisted, a tightening knot threaded by instinct rather than logic. The words of celebration turned grander. Sector heads declared Earth's assets to be redistributed to Concord interests. Relay stations orbiting Terran colonies would be reassigned. News feeds prepared sanitized footage of Earth's last message, or rather the absence thereof, ready for broadcast to every holding, outpost and migration fleet. Atop the dais, Kevron permitted himself a nod, satisfied. The timing was flawless. Earth's fall, televised in real time, would send a ripple of warning across the frontier. In the shadowed wings of the tribunal, maintenance drones zipped unseen, adjusting environmental control. An unnoticed drone, marked for low priority, hovered a moment longer near one of the laser plasma conduits. A faint stutter of its guidance lights went unreported. Behind the grand speeches, the architecture of the hall itself betrayed hairline fractures, brief alignment errors in the laser displays, packet loops whispering backward through registry archives, unscheduled checksum resets, stacking silently in the server basements, yet no alarms sounded. The system flagged anomalies as isolated, contained. Stoke turned toward the assembled delegation, his ceremonial robe catching light in serrated patterns. His gaze swept the counselors. "Let it be remembered," he intoned, "that we offered Earth a place among the stars. They chose silence. We grant it." The council chambers rang with the soft thud of ceremonial staves striking the floor, rhythmic and thunderous. The movement masked the faint tremble that ran through one of the primary support columns. No tremor felt through the body, only caught by finely tuned structural monitors ignored for weeks. Ralvik Owen's datapad vibrated again. An updated report. Recursive loop warnings detected at 3 minor relay hubs, linked to Earth's abandoned sectors. He thumbed through the logs with growing unease, each flicker of data an unwelcome ghost. On the far wall, the Concord's insignia interlocking stars threaded through a unity wreath, blinked for a heartbeat. No one remarked upon it. Counselor Drevik Mar raised his glass again, laughter slipping free now, a sound too sharp against the deadening air. "They fought with words," he said, draining the mist in a single gulp. "And in the end, they lost even those." The room erupted into scattered applause, slow at first, then swelling as more hands joined. Across distant planets, the Concord's agents prepared to receive the news. Earth had been erased, and their fear, once whispered among outlier colonies, would wither in the face of demonstrated dominance. Ralvik closed the datapad slowly, his fingertips. Something built beneath the floor of celebration, a pressure like waters shifting behind an unseen dam. He caught Kevron's gaze for the briefest instant, an unspoken query, but the tribunal head turned back to the revelers, with the certainty of a man admiring the last piece of a finished tapestry. The heads-up displays around the room now ran the victory feeds, sector reclamation notices, station updates, tribute reassignment schedules. At the fringes of every broadcast frame, minor distortions rippled, the faintest ghosting effect as if some old shadow moved behind the polished broadcasts. Ralvik opened a private diagnostic overlay, tracing the loops. His breath caught, not random noise, not drifting static, substructures forming beneath the relay packets, unseen but growing like skeletal frameworks blooming under flesh. His pulse drummed at his temples. Another packet log blinked. A minor council station near Jundrek's belt reported full node reversal, Earth's timestamp reappearing where no transmission had been authorized. And still the room swelled with triumph. The unseen structures expanded. The servers buried beneath the tribunal floor whined, too soft for any ear to catch, but recorded in the environmental logs now overridden by legacy Earth systems marked as dormant. Ralvik stepped back from the floor, moving toward a private console. As the speeches reached their final crescendo, he needed proof, he needed certainty. Because somewhere beneath the roar of alien celebration, something old and cold stirred, and it wore the silence of a dead world like armor. "Recalibrate again. I'm not logging phantom echoes on my station," Ralvik Owen snapped, stabbing the console with 2 fingers as he isolated the data feed. His voice barely rose above the soft whir of the analysis bay, a cavernous alcove tucked beneath the tribunal floor, lined wall to wall with sensor pylons, quantum relay modules, and glimmering heads-up displays. The air tasted stale, like dry cloth forgotten in a sealed room. Dust motes stirred by unseen circulation caught the edge of the console's low blue light as he leaned closer. The datapad in his grip trembled minutely under the cascade of system alerts. His fingers tightened. This wasn't drift. This wasn't ambient relay noise. This was structure. The tribunal above celebrated Earth's so-called demise, speeches still bleeding down through the ventilation shafts, like distant, hollow drumbeats. But here, down where the real framework of the Concorde bled data into lifeblood, Earth's signature was very much alive. Primary checksum failure in Sector L Delta, muttered Technician Viskin across the aisle, his voice dry with disbelief. I'm showing secondary packet reflections. Ghost looping. Relvik shifted, feeling the cold leather of the console chair squeak beneath him. His gaze sharpened on the scrolling streams. Data packets, originating from dark relays long attributed to Earth, drifted into the backbone at irregular intervals, then split, each one duplicated, each duplicate pinged a false origin code. Each echo spiraled outward, bleeding into unrelated Concorde channels. No environmental cause, Viskin murmured, voice clipped. Run packet autopsy, Relvik ordered. His tone cracked the air more sharply than he intended. I want source tree lineage on every echo. A cluster of drone servitors whirred along the maintenance rails overhead, their small frames scanning the modules for thermal irregularities. Relvik caught a glimpse of their faint tracer lights, reflecting off the burnished wall plates, brief spectral lines vanishing as quickly as they appeared. His palms sweated, the friction against the datapad rough now, tacky. Above them, unseen, the Council's laser plasma displays no doubt continued their replay of Earth's defeat, banners unfurling across star sectors. Relvik toggled a deeper diagnostic mode. The terminal buzzed once, twice, then fell into a long, low processing whine. He counted 4 heartbeats before the results spilled onto the screen. Mismatch detected, non-Concorde timestamp present. He blinked, heart plunging into his ribs. The timestamp was malformed, erratic, but familiar. Earth's communication signature, an old mesh code hybridization, no longer used since the treaty integration era. The breath that rattled from him tasted coppery, tainted by a fear he hadn't named yet. Cross-verify, he said lowly. Viskin hesitated. It's probably legacy junk data writing the residuals. Cross-verify. The technician muttered under his breath, but obeyed. Another diagnostic pulse carved its way through the relay core, burning diagnostic shadows across the laser plasma panels, lining the bay's far walls. For a split second, the panels dimmed, then rebounded. Data flashed across the heads-up displays. Timestamp match, Earth origin relay lattice. Relvik's knuckles whitened around the console edge. His mind sprinted ahead, cataloging implications faster than conscious thought. Earth hadn't just been broadcasting passively. They had built a framework that mimicked silence, only to usurp the lattice once the silence was imposed. He toggled open a tertiary channel, routing a personal alert string to Kavran Stokes' encrypted tribunal line. His fingers hovered over the send command. Then he hesitated. A second alert stacked atop the first, duplicate data path detected. Source deep tribunal archives. Not just external sectors. Internal one. Core documentation nodes supposedly isolated from the standard relay web were bleeding timestamp anomalies into their own logs. The tribunal wasn't merely watching Earth's collapse. It was playing back Earth's answer. Above, the sound of distant laughter filtered down again, as though the architecture itself was mocking him. Relvik spun his chair, calling up multi-sector overlays. His retina stung from the blooming lines of error codes pulsing across the heads-up display like invasive roots breaking concrete. Ghost packets weren't just appearing. They were constructing an alternate relay map, one that superimposed over the existing Concorde grid. He lifted a hand to his ear, tapping the internal comlink. Viskin. Priority reroute on all inbound Earth sector packets. Immediate quarantine. The technician's face blanched under the cold lighting. Orders from command. From common sense. Relvik snarled. Move. Viskin's hands shook as he keyed in the commands. The system protested. Low authentication priority. Error stacking. Auto-rescind protocol. The more they tried to isolate the anomalies, the faster the pathways multiplied. Relvik's datapad buzzed a second time. New data alert. Earth sector satellites. Classified dormant for decades. Broadcasting baseline sync pulses across 3 major Concorde transit corridors. Not visible to civilian systems. Invisible to naval command. But active. He stood abruptly, the chair screeching backward against the polished floor, drawing glances from the scattered technicians across the bay. This isn't random drift, he said, voice hollow. It's a lattice weave. No one answered. Above him, unseen, a laser plasma relay pulsed, the timing of its beacon ever so slightly offset, as if the hull's heartbeat had stumbled. Ralvik felt it in his chest. Earth hadn't sent a declaration. Earth had sent scaffolding. One relay node after another lit up on his display, not in chaos but in sequence. Constructed, designed, waiting. He closed his eyes briefly, tasting the dry recycled air catching against the back of his throat. Somewhere distant, closer than he cared to admit, the low, deep vibration of shifting data currents vibrated through the relay frames. Earth wasn't gone. It was inside. Quarantine every sector. Cross-linked to Earth's lattice. Now, Ralvik barked, his voice cutting through the diagnostic bay's tense stillness. Viskin's hands flew across the heads-up interface, gestures sharp, almost violent. Routes collapsed into reroute chains, but every patch stream frayed wider than the last, bleeding data backward like torn fabric, unable to bear new stitching. Above them, the laser plasma displays stuttered again, not off, never completely, but dragging light across the tribunal's ceiling in fractures, as if the building itself struggled to contain the sickness inside. Ralvik leaned into the console, close enough to feel the static whispering against his fingertips. The heads-up display mapped sector anomalies in brutal red outlines, isolated at first, then flowering outward into snarling tangles. "They're building through it," he said under his breath, a thought slipping free before caution could stop it. Viskin hesitated, glancing sideways. "We still have root authority on prime conduits. We isolate nodes manually, split the net down to uninfected clusters." Ralvik processed the suggestion mid-breath. "It's a tourniquet move. We'll lose entire systems. Better than losing the core," Viskin shot back, voice cracking at the edges. Above them a warning tone rolled low and hollow across the tribunal's inner chambers. Heads turned, conversations stuttered. Kevin Stoke materialized in the archway, ceremonial cloak trailing half-forgotten behind him. His face registered mild irritation, not fear, a man still believing in walls he thought were solid. "What's the delay?" Kevin demanded. Ralvik straightened from the console, eyes burning under the stale overhead beams. "Sir, the Earth anomaly isn't confined to sector drift. It's recursive, embedding new architecture as it replicates." "Contain it," Kevin said, slicing the air with one hand. "Patch the node, bury the corruption." Ralvik opened his mouth to argue, found nothing but a rasp of dryness, and nodded instead. Strategy birthed itself in real time. Split Earth's constructed weave by slicing transit corridors down to isolated silos. Each independent relay would suffocate without fresh data, trapping Earth's fingerprints inside dead branches. Viskin compiled the command trees with frantic precision. "We start with Sector L Delta, Jundrex Belt and Orin Verge. Cut deep. No reroutes. Execute," Ralvik said grimly. Across the relay net, shutdown orders screamed outward. Sector barriers folded down like crumpled banners. Signal corridors imploded in cascades, their heads-up maps collapsing into static webs of dead channels. Every hand in the bay moved fast, but the scent of overworked circuitry began to edge the air. An invisible tang of decay carried on the cooling system's recycled breath. "Reports coming back incomplete," Viskin hissed, sweat matting his hairline. Ralvik checked the side feed. Not all sectors obeyed the command packets. Some returned fractured signals, others returned nothing at all. He pulled the feed into a layered overlay. Earth's old timestamp signatures, irregular, fractured, no longer drifted passively through open corridors. They had synchronized, focused, constructed. Secondary infection vector confirmed. Viskin's voice cracked. Urgency shredding protocol. They're bypassing closed sectors, using fallback nodes. Kavrin stepped closer, face whitening under the harsh bay light. Fallback systems are supposed to run autonomously, no external access. Ralvik's knuckles rapped against the side of the console, the sound sharp enough to make Viskin flinch. "They don't need access," Ralvik growled. "They rewrote the fallback logic years ago." Above them, the main laser plasma grid shivered, flickering warning glyphs across the tribunal ceiling like a field of dying stars. Ralvik shifted tactics mid-stride. "We need anchor severance. Cut the root access from core authorization terminal. Earth can't ride fallback nodes if the entire mesh is manually de-authenticated." Kavrin hesitated. Splitting authorization chains meant severing entire Concord sectors from tribunal oversight. Sectors who had pledged loyalty, sectors who now looked to Concord for unity. "They'll call it sabotage," Kavrin said, a low, brittle growl. "They'll call it extinction if we don't." Ralvik snapped back. Viskin keyed new commands with a shudder running down his spine. Manual authorization severance engaged. Yet when the cut commands fired into the relay architecture, the system returned a message Ralvik had not seen in his lifetime. Severance request rerouted. Administrative proxy active. A heartbeat later, the proxy tag pulsed once. Origin, Earth. Timestamp validated. Ralvik staggered back a step, heat draining from his face. Earth had become the administrative core. The relay network no longer recognized Concord's commands as authoritative. Viskin froze mid-command. Cavern's eyes widened, hand tightening on the edge of the laser plasma interface. The realization hit not as a shout, not as a crash, but like a heavy cloth dropped over flames, suffocating, slow, inescapable. Their entire strategy had become a blood offering to Earth's dormant lattice. Above them, the emergency routing maps folded again, red vectors splintering into labyrinthine echoes. Instead of containment, the collapse accelerated. Transit corridors hemorrhaged packet loops faster than command protocols could even acknowledge them. In a matter of minutes, containment had gone from hypothetical to impossible. Ralvik wiped his palm across his jawline, smearing cold sweat. Every plan they implemented only carved deeper roots into the lattice Earth had hidden, in plain sight. One by one, the independent sector relays began auto-confirming Earth's root authority. The tribunal floor above rattled with muffled alarm clacks. Someone finally realized the heads-up displays were no longer showing active jurisdiction maps, but looping static overlaid with a faint corrupted insignia. Ralvik knew the symbol, an ancient Terran glyph, obsolete, forgotten. Until now, he closed his eyes just for a second, and felt the weight of 1,000 silent relay nodes humming a song they were never supposed to remember. The song of activation. The tribunal's leaders scrambled. New override commands piled atop each other, a mass of desperate countermeasures that backfed into corrupted admin trees. Every new command issued now only strengthened Earth's framework. Above the command bay, the emergency banners flickered once, twice, then they stilled. Not blank. Occupy. Earth wasn't fighting back. Earth had finished waiting. Activate the Deep Claws Review, Cavern Stoke barked, voice splintering the growing chaos as tribunal officers scrambled around the command floor. The laser plasma displays above flickered under the strain. Star charts collapsed into walls of shifting error glyphs. Sector alignments severed mid-broadcast. Heads-up notifications failing to latch onto stable data streams. Static crackled at the edges of every frame, leaking like hairline fractures in glass. Ralvik, barely registered the movement around him. His focus locked onto the descending legal AI modules, coffin-sized black slabs lowering from hidden ceiling tracks. Emergency protocol, autonomous judicial inquiry. Cold vapor hissed from the clamps sealing the modules. Lights along their spines ignited, striping the chamber in sterile blue. No emotion, no argument, only law. The central AI designation Lexar V7, initialized with an optical flare that left retinal after images. It pulsed once, recognizing the tribunal's authority stamp, then unfolded its internal query logic across 1,000 index treaty trees. Ralvik felt the cold sweat bead anew along his collarbone. The treaty integration file archives spun into three-dimensional lattice columns, over the heads-up projectors, illuminating the tribunal floor and pages of encoded law. Ancient agreements. Forgotten clauses. Amendments buried beneath layers of diplomatic phrasing. Cavern paced beneath the towering arrays of data, robes snapping lightly at his ankles. Filter for Earth sector conditional triggers, he ordered, eyes darting from script to script. Lexar V7 obeyed, its processing echoing through the speakers with a steady heartbeat cadence. Query accepted, parsing anomalies. Treaty scrolls tightened, collapsing entire decades of negotiation into blinding sequences of redacted terms. Filtration narrowed. Specificity bloomed. Clauses hidden under redundancy fields surfaced, exposing the undercarriage of Earth's true compliance. Ralvik's stomach churned as one document isolated itself, highlighted in muted amber against the flood of white noise. Treaty Code, Line 27. In the event of Earth's involuntary communication severance by external parties, authorization for autonomous network rerouting is granted to pre-registered Earth origin infrastructure. Stokes' steps faltered. He stared at the line as if seeing a trapdoor where once had been marble floor. Cross-reference with activation signals. Ralvik said, the words scraping out raw. Lexar V7 pulsed acknowledgement. Cross-referenced. Activation criteria met upon timestamp nullification. Autonomous reroute engaged. On the tribunal's command bridge, Silence devoured breath and thought alike. Ralvik approached the nearest panel, trailing a finger across the translucent interface. His skin itched against the cold electric pulse vibrating from the surface. The clause wasn't buried by Earth, he said, voice low, brittle. It was ratified by this council. Across the hall, council members who had minutes ago toasted Earth's isolation now stood rigid, their faces drained of fire. Lexar V7, broadcast a final confirmation. Severance condition, project status, active, treaty protection binding. The words etched themselves into every heads-up display, unmovable, final. Kavran's lips twisted in something too small for rage and too large for denial. They didn't sabotage our systems, Ralvik whispered, the realization dawning like an icicle through the spine. We gave them the framework to do it. The tribunal's senior adjudicator, Merrick Dole, staggered to a console, voice sharp with disbelief. Purge the clause. Override authorization now. No, said Ralvik. His hands trembled slightly as he keyed another override attempt. We can't. It's embedded in treaty-protected systems. Severance clauses self-replicate once triggered. Above them, the central laser plasma node buckled once, spitting a halo of burnt light across the tribunal insignia. The core command displays darkened, then reignited, but with new glyphs radiating outward from the center. Simplified Terran script, unadorned, unmistakable. Control Terran severance protocol. Stoke turned in a slow circle, seeing the inevitability sealing the walls around him. We celebrated, he said softly, words rasping dryly in his throat. We celebrated them falling silent. No one answered. The tribunal's judicial AI kept processing. Impassive. Network sovereignty status. Earth origin structures active in critical sectors. Relay root authorities. Realigned. Administrative lockout. Permanent unless voluntary rescindment by Earth High Authority. Ralvik felt something primal inside him recoil. A species once branded as an upstart, a backwater civilization barely out of its own atmosphere, had waited not through might, not through arms but through architecture. Earth hadn't built weapons. Earth had built inevitability, and the Concord had signed every authorization necessary for them to do it. The floor vibrated underfoot as command access relays failed in sequence. The feeling traveled through bones, not a sharp impact but a slow unfurling decay. Ralvik watched counselor after counselor pounding useless commands into frozen panels. Senior judges screamed into dead comms. Sector delegates demanded fallback procedures that no longer recognized their voice prints. At the edge of the council floor, the tribunal's golden banners shivered. A single heads-up display overhead, the last functioning map, flashed one final transition. Earth sector no longer listed as inactive. Earth sector listed as origin. The heads-up feed decayed into silence. Ralvik swallowed hard against the dry rasp in his mouth. Somewhere distant, across crippled relay chains, across severed supply lines, across fleets adrift without alignment, the shape of Earth's silence grew teeth. He stepped back from the panels, leaving command authorities flashing redundant warnings at empty stations. The Concord had sealed its own tomb, and Earth had simply waited for the latch to click. Command Directive 402 rally eastern flank. Confirm trajectory, initiate fallback vectors. Drexvarn roared across the fleet ops bridge, slamming a gloved fist against the primary heads-up panel. The order, bright and sharp against the laser plasma interface, pulsed outward like a signal flare. Within seconds, dozens of cruiser wings acknowledged receipt. Confirmation glyphs strobed alive, and then, one by one, the glyphs flickered into static. No return handshakes, barked Flight Officer Yurek Tov, blinking furiously at the scrambled response threads. His voice cracked through the bridge's growing heat haze, where emergency coolants barely held back the rising tick of terminal alarms. Drex spun toward the relay command pit, boots grinding against the deck plating. Cycle broadcast strength. Triple sweep every channel, punch through it. Crewmen scrambled, faces blanched under the stuttering glare of the failing star maps overhead. The heads-up fleet disposition lattice trembled, projected command lanes nodding into grotesque spirals of half-formed coordinates. Tov's fingers danced across auxiliary nodes. Static screamed back. No valid outbound, he choked. We're firing into dead space. Drex clamped down on the rising heat in his chest, breathing through gritted teeth. Run relay backups, nearest jump hubs. Don't wait for council tags. Systems flared once, then collapsed into identical null returns. In the silence that followed, the ship's structure groaned under shifting mass realignments. as if the surrounding void itself pressed closer. The primary navigation display shuddered, stars blurring at the edges, like watercolor left to bleed across damp paper. Drex's second-in-command, Vark Tenlo, leaned in, speaking low and quick. "Sir, chart references are decaying. Local star maps are reverting to Generation 0 data." "No lattice anchors?" Drex asked, throat tightening. Tenlo's eyes said enough. He jerked his chin toward the shifting starfield. "They're unraveling. We've lost gravitational fixes. We're dead adrift unless we recalibrate by hand." Across the command deck, low murmurs rose, a brutal symphony of disbelief, breaking apart the order that had held fleets together for generations. "Attempt blind vector spread," Drex ordered, each syllable heavy. "Scatter ships to prevent entanglement." Operators obeyed, their touch frantic across keys, but every attempt to coordinate propulsion staggered into feedback loops. Command packets arrived too late, garbled or worse, redirected back in mirrored confusion. At the edge of Drex's vision, one of the smaller patrol ships, the Verlantis, began spinning slowly against the black, its stabilizers firing counter patterns in confused bursts. Without fleet data, without relay beacons, it spun in helpless gyroscopic panic. "Contact them on ship-to-ship line of sight," Tov snapped. Laser plasma tight beams fired, only silence answered. Above the command dais, the master laser plasma display fractured one final time, showing the starfield's ripping navigation grids shearing into raw, unsolvable noise. Drex felt it deep, unspoken, the command lattice, the soul of the Concorde's fleets, bleeding out faster than any admiralty could repair. Somewhere beyond the crushed bridge windows, distant carrier formations peeled away, following phantom coordinates that no longer existed. Sector 4 disintegrating. Someone screamed from tactical. Drex pivoted toward the comms pit. "If you can't hold sectors, link jump navs and burn into neutral gravity wells." "We can't," Tov snarled, thudding his hand against an unresponsive comms core. "Jump gates are blind, stellar drift calculations corrupted." In desperation, Drex keyed an old override buried deep in the ship's auxiliary comm stack. Manual drift beacons, Stone Age by today's standards, designed for fallback scenarios if all else failed. A single heads-up line blinked, deploying emergency beacon. For 3 seconds, hope hung brittle in the air. The beacon stuttered into life. Then abruptly its signal twisted, fracturing across a mirror line error, a ghost echo resembling Earth's old data compression pattern. Tenlo swore under his breath, a ragged sound dragged from lungs too tired for rage. They weren't just lost. They were being rerouted by a system that no longer recognized them as anything but intrusion. On the external visual feed, the bright pinprick outlines of sector jump points winked out one after another, the way fireflies are snuffed before a storm. "Retreat manual formations." Drex growled. "No protocols, visual alignments only. Anything bigger than a patrol ship breaks formation immediately." "But sir," now, the fleet, such as it remained, began its death dance. Ships staggering away from each other without rhyme or rhythm, isolated in hollows of cold stellar drift. Collisions sparked flashes against the dark, brief and pitiful. Across the console displays, nav tags collapsed into nothingness. Whole wings went dark with no confirmation, only a gnawing absence where coordinates used to anchor. Someone in the comms pit, a junior officer too young to hide his fear, whispered into the heavy stillness. "We're blind." Drex slammed his palm against the control rail. "Then you look harder, you find your own sky." It was a lie, a necessary one. Outside the shattered windows of the fleet command carrier, the familiar constellations blurred into twisted parallax shifts. No orientation, no bearings, just cold fields of shifting stars, like a map written by a hand that had never known their shape. An incoming message blinked once, fragmented, struggling against the broken tides. Drex snatched it into buffer memory. Only one phrase came through, partial but unmistakable, stamped in obsolete Terran encoding: "Conditions severance. Trajectory void." The deck tilted under him as autograv systems struggled to find a center in a universe that no longer agreed where the center was. He didn't need a tribunal report. He didn't need a broadcast from Concorde H. He saw the truth bleeding into every panel, every blank coordinate point, every spin-drifting ally vessel spiraling further out into emptiness. The Concorde fleets weren't defeated. They had been unraveled. Around him men barked orders that traveled nowhere, charts filled with directions no one could follow, weapons waited for targets that didn't exist. Drex drew a slow, shuddering breath. feeling the recycled air claw dryly at the back of his throat. They weren't fighting Earth anymore. They were fighting gravity. "Sir, external optics are changing," gasped Tav, the junior officer closest to the primary heads-up panels. Drex Varn steadied himself against the railing, stomach knotted. He followed Tav's outstretched finger toward the panoramic viewport now cracked across its upper rim. At first there was only blackness stitched with familiar stars. Then something else, something vast yet structured, slid into view, refracting light in rippling serrated bands. From horizon to horizon, fine threads of pale blue and gold spiraled into sprawling webs, lattices of impossible scale, folding outward from points unseen, their geometry precise yet somehow organic. Across every heads-up display, sector grids blinked furiously, attempting to adjust, but the frames refused alignment, stubborn against interpretation. "What am I looking at?" Drex's voice scraped out. "Residuals from relay collapse?" Tav offered weakly. "No," Drex said, feeling the certainty lodge in his marrow. "It's design." Above them, what had once been a clean divide between stars and darkness, now rippled with gleaming struts of light, structures too coordinated to be natural, too vast to be accidental. The fleet's remaining ships spun helplessly against the growing panorama. Their running lights blinked, reduced to scattered motes against the curtain of engineered brilliance unfurling around them. Sector by sector, systems that once served as safe havens, fueling stations, relay hubs, navigation beacons, lit up with spiderweb glows, each pulse outlined corridors stitched not by Concord hands, but by Terran will, buried deep inside the machinery of the star. The lattice wasn't just around them, it had been there inside them, waiting. Drex staggered forward to the navigation podium. His gloved fingertips skimmed the cracked glass of the manual sensor override. He forced a recalibration sweep. The panel bled static. New coordinate overlays ghosted across the map, but they weren't Concord standards. Earth's signature coding flowed through every grid line, now tight, economical, merciless. The bridge's lower decks filled with urgent, half-choked voice, attempting realignment, jump vector miscalculations, star mass indexing skewed. Drex watched one cruiser attempt a blind burn through the growing web of lattice beams. The moment its prow touched the nearest strand, light arced across its hull in fingers of icy blue. The ship halted mid-thrust, systems collapsing in a cascade of thermal flickers, before the vessel simply drifted sideways, powerless toward nowhere. Above the command center, the heads-up displays blurred fully into unfamiliar architecture, Earth's lattice map superseding every Concord directive. And still the lattice grew. It pulsed like breathing veins stretched across the heavens, alive in ways no design should be. Conduits thickened at major intersection points, forming glowing knots where ancient Terran compression nodes had once lain dormant. Drex turned sharply toward Tav. "Show me fallback options." Tav scrolled desperately, sweat trailing down his brow, the feed lines responding with ghost data. "There's no clear vector," Tav croaked. "Every known jump corridor intersects their lattice. Every star chart they had trusted, every navigational buoy they had ever calibrated against the frameworks were gone, overridden, not by destruction, but by construction. Earth hadn't simply erased their maps. They had replaced them. The bridge's lighting dimmed into twilight hue. Only the external glow from the ever-spreading lattice bathed the decks now, casting crew members into skeletal silhouettes, outlined in trembling blue. Drex straightened. His joints ached as if the pressure in the air itself had changed. Across the viewport, the first signs of Concord colony beacons began to die, swallowed by the unfurling lattice, their last flickers devoured by quiet fingers of light. Each sector gone meant another memory lost, another promise broken. A low shudder ran through the ship as residual gravity anchors, blind to their original planets, drifted without orientation, tethered now only to the impossible web spinning through the night. "Status of Jukan Command," Drex asked quietly. No answer. "Status of Oran Verge." Silent. Each name spoken felt like casting a stone into an endless lake, only to watch it sink without even a ripple. Tav whispered, barely audible, "We're standing inside a tomb, and it's still building around us." Drex swallowed back the sting behind his eyes. Emotion was death. Movement was survival. Yet even survival felt irrelevant now. He pressed two fingers against the sensor pad, feeling the warmth of failing systems beneath the cold overlay. A final desperate diagnostic pulled visual telemetry from the remaining fragments of long-range scans. The lattice spanned farther than a sector. It folded across entire constellation belts. Whole migratory pathways mapped in forgotten epochs had been bound into the Terran gridwork. Silent, indifferent, complete, not warfare, ownership. Somewhere beyond the corona of newly woven corridors, where Earth's true installations must have slumbered unseen for generations. An old protocol still blinked, severance active, lattice operational, external authority none. Across the far reaches of the dying fleet, ship commanders transmitted fractured requests for rally points. Each signal ricocheted through dead corridors, bouncing helplessly against structures that no longer answered to Concord protocol. The bridge lights shuddered one last time before stabilizing under the new field gravity set by the lattice structure. It was not tuned to comfort. It was tuned to endurance, built not for the Concord's benefit, but for Earth's dominion over the silence they had been handed. Drex closed his eyes just for a heartbeat, and when he opened them, the stars were gone, replaced by glowing veins of human design stretching endlessly into the dark. Status update, Cavern Stoke, rasped into the Tribunal's emergency channel. No reply. Only the hollow static of systems bleeding out one by one. Above the Tribunal dais, the laser plasma banners sagged under collapsing data feeds, their brightness guttering in waves of red. Counselors clung to dead terminals, mouths moving, voices failing to break the heavy stillness swallowing the chamber. Heads-up displays flickered once more, showing nothing but an empty seal where Earth's insignia should have been erased. Instead, it gleamed, a single glyph, cold, unyielding. Across the grand central spire, the final audit lines crawled upward, etching Earth's verdict into every surviving channel. Severance condition, fulfilled. No override command touched it. No protest amended it. The law had closed. Braxil Core staggered toward the center console, fingers raw from failed authentication attempts, his robes dragging across the stone tiles in a whisper of defeat. He tapped the master relay again. No response. He spoke a command sequence meant to unlock any Concord system across 100 sectors. The heads-up projectors fed back a single line, not recognized. In the far corner of the tribunal floor, a knot of aides abandoned ceremonial scripts, papers scattering like dying moths against the polished stone. One aide fell to his knees, another simply sat down, staring at the pulsing heads-up glyphs without blinking. No alarm sounded. The Concord had already run out of warnings. Ralvekun leaned heavily against a wall console, watching the inevitable unfold with a strange sense of quiet acceptance. Nothing left to calculate, nothing left to patch. Footsteps rang against the tribunal marble, sharp, measured. All eyes turned. Varanist entered without announcement, his black Terran envoy uniform immaculate against the dimming lights. No entourage, no banners, only silence clothed him. He moved across the shattered tribunal floor like a ghost walking among ruins. At the center dais he stopped. He looked at no one. He demanded nothing. He reached forward, laid one hand lightly atop the central transmission plate. The final feed initiated automatically as if the tribunal itself craved an ending. Across the Concord every surviving heads-up display blinked. Earth's last message queued. A breath stretched through the broken hall. Varanist raised his head, gaze unflinching. His voice carried without amplification, slicing the stillness cleaner than any blade. You silenced us, now you'll beg to speak. The words fell like stones into a still pond, sending ripples of collapse through the hollow tribunal. No one dared answer. No one dared move. Above Varan, the laser plasma banners burned out, one by one, collapsing into ashes that floated downward like snow over the crumbling council. The audit seals closed themselves. Treaty protocols dissolved under Earth's overriding terms. Final. Unforgiving. The tribunal chamber dimmed, as power allocation rerouted through Earth's embedded lattice control. It wasn't sabotage, it was sovereignty. Varanist turned without ceremony, footsteps echoing sharper now against the cracked tiles. No guards approached him, no sanctions touched him. He didn't need protection. He was Earth's signature walking among forgotten authors of their own ruin. One aide attempted a protest, words rising and dying in his throat. Varan never paused. At the chamber threshold he stopped. He did not look back. He did not grant mercy. He did not need to. The walls trembled again, not from violence, but from the final dissolution of authority that no longer had even itself to cling to. Above the dying council, The heads-up displays now showed only one message repeating across every sector: external Concord authority, no. Earth's sovereign status, active. In the crumbling reaches of what had once been the galactic center of unity, fleets drifted blind across black corridors, tribunal records faded to static, and planets waited for instructions that would never come. Varanist passed through the outer tribunal gates, leaving behind nothing but silence and ashes. Behind him the last servers collapsed into cascading shutdowns, cutting off the Concord from itself, from its history, from its future. No war, no victory, only silence wrapped in inevitability. The tribunal's last banner smoldered on the stone floor, a forgotten relic of a forgotten claim. Earth had not overthrown them. Earth had simply walked away, and the stars once charted by Concord decree now spun freely under no flag but Earth's silence. "Give me something," Drexvarn muttered to the dead console, voice lost in the hollow space where commands once ruled empires. No reply came, only the thin whine of cooling systems struggling against nothing. Across the shattered fleet, ship after ship hung motionless, their guidance blind, their nav charts dissolving like ash in rain. The heads-up panels above blinked sporadically, projecting old paths that now led nowhere, their coordinates severed from meaning. In the distance the lattice still glowed, those cold Terran lines unfurling across star systems like veins through frozen soil. No new transmissions filled the silence, no reinforcements crossed the thresholds. Earth did not speak again. They didn't need to. The tribunal halls rotted in the dark, walls coated in the ash of fallen banners, ceremonial staves abandoned where they lay. No last speech, no surrender, just empty corridors breathing recycled air into dead council chambers. Ralvik Owen stood before what remained of the central archive vault, hands at his sides, eyes hollow, treaty seals cracked and blackened under the weight of silent systems no longer aligned to their makers. Above the dead terminal, a message still looped in slow, merciless cadence: severance complete, Concord compliance concluded. He didn't try to stop it. Somewhere beyond the fractured tribunal grounds, Varin Ist walked calmly into the darkness, leaving no trail, no final glance over his shoulder. Earth had sent no armies. They had sent inevitability. Across scattered fleets adrift in forgotten quadrants, captains screamed orders into comms that folded back on themselves, broadcasting only ghost reflections of what had. One ship, once the pride of the Orin Verge flotilla, spun slowly end over end, its stabilizers flickering uselessly as its crew abandoned stations, one by one, knowing no course, no rescue awaited. In the scattered remains of orbital colonies, relay towers burned cold, automated fail-safes blinking fruitlessly into voided sectors. Drift became destiny. No ship dared approach Earth's corridor. They could see it now, a black sphere where no signal penetrated, no beacon escaped. Earth had severed itself, and everything else had severed with it. Stars, once meticulously mapped by Concord authority, now slid untracked across shattered nav screens, each drift further proof that the center no longer held. Entire sectors no longer recognized Concord override codes. Civilian settlements cut off and blind began sealing their borders, unable to trust a lattice now aligned to a silent, watching architect. Drexvarn gripped the railing before him as the flagship's bridge listed sideways with another gravity ship. Tav, hunched over the secondary relay station, whispered, "They're not attacking." Drex didn't turn. They don't have to. Outside the viewport, the webwork of Earth's design pulsed once, a slow, deliberate heartbeat, through the broken arteries of interstellar commerce, command, and culture. Every attempt to reroute around it failed. Every resistance starved without firing a shot. The human lattice didn't just intercept systems. It replaced the concept of system itself. At a forgotten outpost near the Rimac Verge, a junior signal tech stared at her console, tears cutting clean paths through the grime on her cheeks, watching her screen flash the same Earth origin glyph over and over, each pulse slower, each echo emptier. Above Jundrek's belt, 3 Concord dreadnoughts floated powerless, their reactor cores refusing to ignite full burn without sector registry approval, an approval now redirected through Earth's dormant relay standards, silent monuments to pride undone. Inside the tribunal's deepest archive vaults, a single autoscribe continued scratching on parchment reels, logging decisions no tribunal would ever ratify again. The galactic network, once a tapestry of Concord decree, now lay gutted, its threads bound tightly to a silent center that refused parley. In the emptiness that followed, rumors grew like mold in forgotten chambers, whispers of Earth's return, not as diplomats, not as conquerors but as something colder, something unanswerable. Entire migration routes, rerouted away from Terran influence, despite knowing it was futile. Entire sectors ceased transmissions altogether, choosing dead silence over the terror of calling into a net they no longer owned. In the drifting remains of the Concord fleet, Drex stood alone on the bridge of the command carrier, watching nav points blink out like dying embers. He raised his hand toward the last active heads-up display. It showed a single node, Earth's anchor lattice, steady, unbroken, alive. His fingers brushed the cold surface once. History, he said aloud, the word dry as dust. Tav shifted at his station, voice nearly too soft to hear. Ours or theirs? Drex smiled then. A broken thing. Ours ended. Theirs was waiting. Behind them the command deck lights dimmed again. Not from battle, not from sabotage. Simply because there was no network left to sustain. Only Earth's silence, humming just beyond the edge of human comprehension. Ships drifted, stations cracked, relays blackened. The stars no longer knew their names. In the endless dark, Earth remained untouchable, unchallenged, and the galaxy, that had once mocked Earth's delay, now dared not even whisper toward its shores. History closed its books. Earth didn't conquer. They erased the conversation, and in the vast corridors of empty space, the silent stars bore witness to the day humanity did not rise as warriors. They rose as inevitability.